Hey, selectors, welcome back to another, well, I can't call this a this week because we're covering 2 weeks of information. Sorry I didn't cover last week, but there's something I'm going to be talking about today that I wanted more information on before I started spouting words, since it's kind of important to the tournament scene of the game. But again, welcome back to another This Week in WiXoss. So for this video, we're going to be covering on the English side of the game. We have some event information that's super exciting for coming up. On the Japanese side of the game, we have pull ratios for 24p1. So I'm talking about like case ratios, box ratios, etc., as well as the Japanese side of the game recently came out with a floor rules document. So we'll be going over some of that today, and I'll explain the portion later. But we're going to start with the Japanese side of the game today because some of the stuff in here is going to tie into the English news. So about, let's say, maybe 3 weeks ago now, there was a 10th anniversary product stream on the Japanese channel where they went over basically on some end a gameplay video showing the new cards for their newest set, as well as opening an entire case on stream. And from there we were able to figure out the case ratios as well as some information from Twitter about case ratios. So the current known case ratios, and it seems to be pretty consistent, for 24p1 in one box you will pull 4 SRs, and I will also, before I continue on this, before I forget, this is for the Japanese boxes only. This may or may not be the exact same in English, so keep in mind, again, this is Japanese only at the moment. So one of their boxes will contain 4 SRs, 1 LR, which is the rig rare, 1 SSR or SLR, which is the new SRP, which is new SRP, LRP type rarity. You'll get one of those per box, and 2 to 3 full art rares, which were, remember from a previous video, these full art all-star cards or older cards within the game. Textless, full art, beautiful cards to look at. And honestly, I'm surprised these were 2 to 3 a box. I was expecting these to be like maybe 2 to 3 a case, since they're, you know, older cards, but it seems to not be the case here. And then all in total, one case will contain 16 SSRs or SLRs. From the product stream that we saw, or that was posted live, it was an even split. I've seen cases on Twitter where it's a little bit of more of one versus the other, and cases are guaranteed 1 UR or UAR as well. One thing that isn't guaranteed per case, however, is hot packs or god packs, however you want to call them. So these packs are specified for 1 Larig, so in this case there's going to be 5 different ones, and it will contain both of the LRs for that Larig, which is their arts, the UARs for those arts, there's 2 of those, the SSR version of their partner Signy, the LRP of their trial deck level 3, or sorry, the SLR of their trial deck level 3, the SLR of their booster level 3, and the UR of their booster level 3. And this, like I said, this does exist for each Larig. So there's Tama, Hanyo, Pure Luke, Midoriko, and Urith. So if you look at the screen, you'll see what the Tama one looks like, and it'll basically be the same for all 5 Larigs. The pack will just be them and anything that involves them. So like for Pure Luke's case, her 2 arts, her 2 level 3s, and her partner Signy Code Vacuum. I don't remember the names of the other 3 outside of, or I don't remember the names of the other ones outside of Pure Luke, sorry. But keep in mind that, yeah, this is how, or these aren't guaranteed per case. this is a chance to get one in a case. But if you do get one, you're loaded with bling, basically. It's beautiful. But with that out of the way, we're going to go to the floor rules discussion now. Now, if you've been playing card games, you're sort of familiar with what floor rules are. If WiXoss is your first card game, you might not fully understand what floor rules are. So basically, floor rules is like a small, quote small, document containing information that is needed for smooth operation of any official event. Now remember, official event, so non-official events don't need to worry about actually adhering to these, although I wouldn't be surprised if non-official events will adhere to these just for consistency's sake for tournament players trying to prep for events and such like that. And it also outlines the definitions of what different phases and actions and what's legal and not legal, which is basically, your what to do, not to do kind of thing in any kind of card game, sets a tone to that. So this was announced in Japanese, and since its announcement, this will in the future, or already has, affected the English side of the game, even though we don't have an officially English translated document yet. The judges for North America are working on getting a translated document with their understandings of what these rules should be, how to interpret them, kind of thing, our interpretations on them, and such like that. That is still a work in progress, but our head judge, Neat, shortly after, a few days after this was announced, came out with a announcement on the Cartamagica server covering the important highlights we would like to share in advance involving tournament operation. So I want to summarize most of those points here in the next few slides. And please keep in mind, for any of the information that I am about to say, it is subject to change, so please take this with a grain of salt. Don't take this for law. This may change if Takara Tomy changes the floor rules doc, or if the interpretation of these sections ends up changing. So we'll get started out with time limit procedures, section 2.4. So beforehand, in the English side of the game and how we've interpreted that the time rule should be, is all players will proceed to the attack phase when time is called, and at the end of this attack phase, you would proceed to the end of game procedures, which would be your tiebreakers, or if it's just a straight double loss, you'd proceed to that right afterwards. However, officially now, it is, if the current turn player is in the attack phase, they must finish the phase and the turn, then you proceed to end of game procedures. Otherwise, you immediately move to end of game procedures. So if you're in the middle of your main phase and time is called kind of thing, you proceed straight to end the game. Now, additional information involving this specific interaction. Phases are considered to have been completed when the turn player, or whoever owns that specific phase, declares said phase to be over. Keep in mind, this isn't a section that I'm not going to cover a lot, but shortcutting is allowed, so you can go straight from draw to attack phase, if so be, so long as you declare the phase to be over. And with that in mind, if the declaration is made at the moment time is called, the participant has been considered to successfully move to the corresponding phase. So if you say you are going to attack phase, the minute time is called, you are now in the attack phase. And for communication purposes, as said from Neat, when time is called, please hold what you're doing, and then you may go straight to you may claim to go straight to the attack phase, and you have successfully moved, so that way communication isn't lost while announcements are being made. This is not permission to, as time is called, rush through an entire turn, then call attack phase. So please keep that in mind. Moving on, Section 2.5b, Judgment, which is a newly announced end-of-game procedure, but talked about it. So what this is a comparison of specific zones to determine a winner, and there are 3 small sections to it. So Section A, if the sum of the life cloth and non-craft cards remaining in the Lyrig deck totaled together, the higher number wins the game. So if you have 3 life cloth and 3 non-craft in your Lyrig deck, and your opponent has 2 and 2, you win because you have more cards and resources available, kind of thing. In the case that this number is the same, you then will count cards in hand, enter, in field, and the higher number in this case wins the game. In the case both of these sections are tied, a different tiebreaker will be decided, whether it's both are tied, you go straight to double loss, or both are tied and you go straight to, like, burst chance. Now, I don't think I've covered burst chance on the channel, but basically burst chance is you take all your main deck cards, shuffle them back so you have the full 40, and then both players at the same time reveal the top card of their deck. If both cards have a life burst or do not have a life burst, players will reveal the next card in their deck. And you will keep doing this until only one player reveals a life burst. The player who reveals the life burst is considered to have won that game. Now, it was also announced that Judgment will not be used for current official competitive play, so GPs basically. It is encouraged that locals try it out, but the judges have the reason that this won't be implemented. And as with anything I've already talked about at this point, or anything I'm about to talk about in the next couple of slides, feel free to ask ask questions in the comments, or better yet, ask these questions in either like the card game server or the Cartamagica server, and they will be answered to the best of our abilities. Because, like I said prior, we're still working on this translated document, and everything is subject to change. So, continuing on, we have a section for conceding the game 2.8. Now, this doesn't really change a whole lot. You're still allowed to concede the game at any point in time during the game. But one thing that did stand out is that you are allowed to ask your opponent to concede. Now, do keep in mind that you cannot pester your opponent to concede the game. And once you have been met with a refusal for your current ask for concession, do not continue to prompt, so don't pester them, and because this will be considered unsportsmanlike conduct. But this does not mean you cannot ask them again later in the round. You may request your opponent to concede again if your opponent has refused a prior request, but if a judge gets called in this case, the judge will determine if this is considered repeatedly asking or if it is considered a new request. So an example of what a new request would be is, say you're currently at your turn, your opponent has like a number of life cloth and you have a number of damage that would be considered lethal, such as like they have 2 and you have 4 on board. You may ask your opponent, would you like to concede? If you know that they have like no assists available, you know all of their servants are out, kind of thing. If they tell you no, you play through the turn, and if they happen to live through another turn and goes back to your turn and you present the same situation again, you may ask your opponent for concession again. This does not mean you did one thing and then ask again. No, it's more like a significant amount of information about the game has to change before you can make a new request for concession. And to keep in mind when asking for these concessions, it must be considered brief, as to not constitute slow play calls. So don't argue for 5 minutes while your opponent should concede. If you ask them to concede, they say no, leave it at that. It should only take like 5 to 10 seconds to make this call. And naturally, as with anything, do not say, hey, if you concede, I'll give you this kind of thing. This is considered bribe, and I shouldn't have to say this, but I will. If you threaten your opponent to concede, this is not tolerated as well. So, continuing on sections, this one's going to be a little bit brief, but I'll try to explain it the best I can, because it is very much a judge's discretion kind of section, is section 4.6, which is takebacks, which is, you ever make a play and go, well, that was stupid, I want to reverse it kind of thing. This section says you are allowed to reverse play or plays so long as new information has not been gained during the course of the play or plays that you are attempting to reverse. So, popular example here would be, say, harmony costs. I hate this mechanic, but it is a thing. Say you play a Phalaris, you decide that I'm not going to pay the harmony cost. So Phalaris enters downed. You fill the rest of your board with Signy, nothing else has happened, but then you decide, actually, I want Phalaris to be upped. You are allowed to revert play and pay the harmony cost for Phalaris so she remains upped when you play her. This would be perfectly valid. However, if you play Phalaris, you don't pay the harmony cost, and then you play, say, Random Drain, and you both draw one, your opponent discards one, and then you go, wait, I want to pay the harmony cost for Phalaris. At that point, you are no longer allowed to do so, because forcing your opponent to discard and you drawing a card is considered gaining new information, and at that point, any action after you have gained that information cannot be reversed. Another thing too, and I didn't put a bullet point on here, is you cannot use your opponent's reaction or lack of reaction can also be considered information. So with that in mind, at this point, and I've said it before, the decisions to allow reversal of play are up to the discretion of the judge, but it has been currently stated that the responsibility of convincing the reversal to the judge is the player requesting the reversal regardless of who calls for judge. Again, this document, or this section of the document, is very weird, I guess, but like I said, if you have any questions on it or any of the stuff that I'm talking about currently, talk about in the Card of Magica server, ask about it in the card game server, ask about it in the comments as well, and I will try to get you these answers as best as I can. So those are basically all the major sections, but there is some little other itty-bitty tidbits of info that don't really have a section, but is important information to know. You are allowed to ask judges about correct card text and card interactions. However, the drawback on this is the judges are allowed to provide these based on context. However, the card also must be named properly. So, for example, you can ask a judge, what is Cursan's effect? And a judge will answer this question. What you cannot ask is, what is every white card with a life burst, for an example? Because, 1, there's too many. That's going to take up too much time. 2, that is a very broad question. Cannot answer that. You're also allowed to request a judge to answer a question privately, as to maybe not lead your opponent on to what you're doing or what may happen to them, kind of thing, if you're not sure how a specific interaction works. And when you do request this, the judge will walk away from the table with you to answer the question. You are allowed to replace damaged cards mid-tournament, but you must show to the judge that show the damage on the card, and they will provide you with a substitute of some sort, whether it be a personal copy of the card that is damaged, or a judge's proxy, which is basically they take a card, they write what it is on the back of it, or something like that. You will be provided with a substitute of some sort to replace this card in your deck. Like an example, like you're shuffling and you accidentally fold a card in half. That's acceptable for, like, replacement. I don't think anybody's going to accidentally fold a card in half shuffling, and if you do somehow do that, please treat your cards a lot better. Like, that terrifies me. Additionally, your cards are allowed to be drawn on. This does not mean proxy level zeros. Like, official game pieces, like Signy, Rigs, that have, like, signatures or fun little doodles on them from, like, other players or stuff like that, or any other, like, thing. Your cards can be drawn on, but if you are curious about, like, if it's borderline, ask a judge, because if a card is determined, like, there's enough doodles on it or enough artistic variance on it to gain a competitive advantage, the judges may not allow that card. But so long as it does not gain a competitive advantage, then it's fine. So, like, an example, you have, like, one of the Sleepy level zeros signed by the English producer of the game. That's not really giving a competitive advantage. That's fine. Or another example, say you have a copy of Medjed signed by all the judges. I know somebody who has one of these. You are allowed to use that so long as there's no competitive advantage gained because of the modifications to the card. And then lastly, this wasn't mentioned in the announcements, but it is something I can say. And keep in mind, remember, this is translated from Japanese to English. This is not English. This is not an official English document yet. So, if the participant's native language is not Japanese, he or she may request the English text. This is really important and probably gives away the next announcement that I am about to make. Because this implies that English players may go to Japan and play in Japanese tournaments. Which brings me to our English news for this video, which, surprise, Mugen Shoujo Cup 2024 invitations, as well as the next 2 Grand Prix for North America. So we have Las Vegas. We're going back to Las Vegas, July 20th at the Alexis Park Hotel. So the same place as the prior Vegas tournament. And then For Texas, it will be at the Renaissance Dallas Hotel on December 7th. So at these tournaments, first and second place of each of these Grand Prix, so 2 players per tournament, will be awarded invitations to the final tournament in Japan. Now, based on the wording, I'm going to assume this isn't like paid invites. I'm going to assume like you just get the invitation to the tournament and you have to pay your way. More information on this will be announced in the future, or probably at the GP, further clarifying this. The Mugen Shoujo Cup, so the final tournament being referenced at this point, will be played using Japanese edition cards. So it means players in English are not restricted just to English cards. You are allowed to play anything that's available in Japanese Diva Selection at the time of Mugen Shoujo 2024. And decks of Japanese cards will be provided, so you don't have to worry about getting the cards yourself. The decks will be provided so long as obviously you give them a deck list. Now keep in mind that the above 2 GPs are held in North America. GPs with invitations to be held like other regions where English is available will be announced shortly. And the 2 countries I give are Europe and other Asian regions. So this is like super exciting for the English side of the game, because I know a lot of people wanted something like this, and finally getting this is amazing. As a matter of fact, like, I'm kind of jealous because I'd love to go play Mugen Shoujo Cup, because like that's like the grand tournament for, you know, everything. But like, this is, like I said, this is still super hype. It's a great opportunity for us to, you know, show our worth. The only thing that's going to be rough, and I know it's going to be a learning curve for a lot of players, is learning that, like, if you get selected to, or if you are able to go, learning the Japanese meta in like such a short time, especially looking at that Texas date, you get like 2 months if you know nothing about the Japanese meta and you're planning on going to, you know, learn the Japanese meta, which is really interesting, at least at the current moment. So we're in May, and arts just came out for Diva Selection, but it'll probably be ironed out by the time we get to, you know, Texas. There are a lot of players currently in the community that pay attention to the Japanese side of the game and what's going on there. So information will be plentifully available. I know I plan to start covering more Japanese stuff on the channel before this announcement even happened. But now with this announcement, like, I have more of a reason to do so, to keep players informed on both sides of the game in terms of meta, gameplay, etc., etc. So please look forward to that, and keep that in mind as well when prepping for the GPs. But with all of that information given, that is going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching or listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. And if, like I said, probably as a broken record at this point, if you have any questions about the ruling document, please leave them in the comments or ask them in the Discords. We'll try to answer them. The judges will try to answer these questions to the best of your ability. To the best of our ability. And also just tell me what you think about us going to Mugen Shoujo, like actually being able to go to Mugen Shoujo. That's still super hype. I'm still reeling in on that after it got announced maybe a few days ago as of recording. With that said, everybody have a good rest of your week, and look forward to next week's video.